Hi everybody! Today we are going to paint some urban landscapes, houses and buildings in a very minimalist and simplified way. Before we start painting, let's take a moment to sketch our designs. Even if you've never drawn or painted before, you're going to be surprised by how easy this is and how well you can do it. Drawing houses and buildings isn't much different from the basic doodles we did as kids. We'll be using those simple shapes, and through repetition, color, and texture, we'll transform them into grown-up paintings. The core idea here is simplicity. We'll begin with basic structures, lines, and shapes, and build from there. If drawing freehand feels intimidating, feel free to create a template. Here, I made one with paper cut. It will help keep your lines clean and neat, and you can reuse it to design as many buildings as you like. Our first painting is very minimalist. It's basically composed of solid blocks of color, and you don't need to force any texture. The paint itself naturally creates it. You will notice lighter areas where there is less pigment on the paper and darker areas where the paint is more saturated. I personally love this natural texture because it adds richness, especially in minimalist compositions like the ones we are creating. However, if you prefer a smoother, flatter look, simply add more layers of paint. That will even out the texture and intensify the color. For this style, I recommend using soft, flat brushes because they give you more control. You can hold it the way I am doing here, and you see that it makes it much easier to create straight lines. As you can see, these are just blocks of color. You don't need many colors, just enough to suggest the walls and shadows, and it looks absolutely beautiful. By the way, if you're interested in the origins of this aesthetic, you might want to look into the work of Mexican architect and designer Luis Barragan. His use of color and minimalist forms is absolutely stunning, still today. Another artist, though not as minimalist, is the American painter Edward Hopper, known for his haunting, isolated scenes. He painted solitude like no one else. Anyway, back to our painting. Once again, we're just painting blocks of color. If you want and like that natural textured look, simply let the paint do its thing. If you want a flatter, smoother finish, build up more layers on top. I personally love the texture because it brings a touch of humanity into such rigid compositions. In a world where so many images are created by computers, it's refreshing to see the rawness of something that is handmade. It reminds us that there is a human behind the work. It's simple, it's precise, and yet full of life. Now, moving on to our second composition, a city skyline silhouette. This follows the same minimalist concept, just blocks of color. The shapes couldn't be any simpler, just vertical blocks lined up in uneven rows. This time, we added a subtle gradient background for the sky, using just a touch of more blue for depth. The buildings are painted in 3 shades of burnt amber. I mixed in some white and blue to vary the tones. To create depth, the buildings in the background are lighter and the ones closer to us are darker. You don't need to add any details like windows or doors. The silhouette and the texture of the paint are enough. I initially tried adding windows, but later I decided to remove them because they really weren't necessary, at least for this minimalist style. Our third painting is a small village in the folk art style. Again, everything is kept very simple and minimal. The houses are all basically the same color, yellow, but we create a visual interest by playing with light and shadow. So all left sides are painted lighter and all the right sides are darker, regardless of whether it's technically the front or back of the house. Consistency in light direction is key to keeping the composition coherent. You can, of course, use multiple colors if you prefer, but in keeping with our minimalist theme, using just one color works beautifully. I decided to add some greenery to bring a little more life to the scene. I used 2 shades of green, one darker, made by mixing blue, yellow, and a hint of red because it gives it a warm tone, and a lighter green made by mixing the same dark green with the pale yellow used in the houses. Using the same palette across the painting creates visual harmony, which is important when working with minimal compositions. Too many random colors can make things look chaotic. And here we are aiming for calm simplicity. So less is more. This is actually the first time I've painted something like concrete as opposed to nature. Flowers, portraits, animals, or natural landscapes have always been my main subjects. I personally don't love concrete as the core element. When I come home, I want to feel isolated and safe from the world outside. So to me, a painting is a window to a different, dreamier world, not a reflection of my daily urban life. So when I paint buildings, I like to add something whimsical and natural to transform it into a fantasy rather than a concrete jungle. It becomes a place I like to be rather than a place I pass through every day. Now, for our last composition, very similar to the village. But this time, the houses are painted in different colors. We still keep the minimalist approach, simple blocks of color, but we add windows and doors. These small details shift the mood entirely, giving the painting a more playful, childlike vibe. Something you might find in a child's bedroom or a young adult's place. It's a great example of how tiny changes can dramatically alter the tone of the painting. And here they are. This is the result of today's practice. I hope this video inspires you to create your own minimalist buildings, to explore simple shapes and turn them into something truly beautiful. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.